This is the Baunfire Gaming Podcast, episode 361. I'm your host, Morgan, aka Bon Diesel, and this week we'll be talking about Arc Raiders is out, Halo is coming to PlayStation, weird Mass Effect collaborations, and much more. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app, leave a review on Spotify or iTunes, and subscribe to the Bon Diesel YouTube channel to get all of my videos, including this podcast. And I want to wish you a very happy Halloween. Let's get into the gaming news. I definitely don't have big red marks on my head from a Mass Effect helmet that I tried to put into the intro of this. We'll see if it makes the final cut. I don't know if I can make it work or not. I guess you'll know before I do. Let's talk about Arc Raiders and its release and reception. We don't have an OpenCritic or Metacritic score for Arc Raiders quite yet. It didn't have... So it technically had an early access, I guess, but it wasn't like the final version of the game. The content creators and stuff who got to do it, their accounts were reset. They don't, as far as we know, have any advantage other than if they had the upgraded version, which I have, and I don't even think it really had that big of an upgrade. So it's a lot of fun. Now, I've been playtesting this game, I think as long as 3 years ago, I think is when they did their first playtest. And I remember that first playtest because it was like definitely an early playtest of a game where it had like missing assets. It had like no explanation for what you were supposed to do. It just kind of threw you in and you played. And, it was brutal because it's a brutal game even today at 1.0. But it was brutal then too, man. It's an unforgiving game, and it's an unforgiving genre. The extraction shooter is a big topic of conversation right now. It has been for a while. We kind of had games evolve from just multiplayer, kind of competitive, like shooter games, to PUBG and the Division survival mode. Kind of introduced this kind of a battle royale with PUBG, and then like an extraction kind of game with the survival mode and the Division. And ever since then we've had those games evolve themselves. We've had games like Warzone, which was preceded by Blackout, Call of Duty's kind of battle royale answer. Call of Duty even did an extraction game called DMZ that was like okay. Escape from Tarkov has really, I think, the most seriously established the actual extraction shooter, where some of those other games you got like rewards for getting out. But like a battle royale, only one team or one player gets out, right? Extraction games aren't just about one team. It's about just getting out in competition with others, right? So Tarkov, I think really took that part of it and went really hard with it. And has for, that game's been in testing and beta for, 5-6 years, I believe now. And then you have like Apex Legends doing more of the battle royale thing. And you've had games try to do the extraction focus as well. The Division Heartland was a game that I was involved with from the very start, kind of as a community liaison or contributor. And I saw that game go from being a straight up battle royale to more of the extraction to before it got canceled, it actually was kind of a single player co-op game. It was weird what happened with that. But we've had all these games kind of trying to do, I would say, the Tarkov thing more specifically. And a lot of people have failed. The Cycle was a game I remember that kind of tried to do this. And it's because Tarkov, especially at one point, had what seems to be a pretty huge player base. I actually would argue Tarkov is going to come out in final release here in the next month or two. I suspect it's smaller now than it's been in like 3 or 4 years. It really peaked 2 or 3 years ago when before a bunch of stuff happened. And, I think people have been looking for a game that provides that anxiety and that stress and that accomplishment and that risk and all of that but that was a little more casual friendly than Tarkov. Tarkov is a game that, one, is badly made. It's just a buggy mess. After all these years, it's on an engine that doesn't seem to be very good for this type of game, for multiplayer games in general. The developers are both shady and kind of incompetent, it seems. And, you know, whether it's mechanics or just the actual game itself, they've just never found a good sweet spot, at least not in my opinion. And, you know, the player base is pretty loyal to them. A lot of them have been around for half a decade at this point, if not more. And they're very defensive of that game. And while you see people, you know, kind of talk about the reality of it and how things are maybe not the best there and things like that, you do still see a lot of people be like very hyper focused on, you know, that's the only good one, and all these other games that try to do it suck. And I think Arc Raiders has been the first one to really make a real effort to provide that similar experience to Tarkov, but do it in their own way. It's a third person game as opposed to first. A lot of the quests and the way that you handle inventory and all of that are much more, I don't want to say simplified, but just more efficient and more clear. The Tarkov is a game that is just a hot mess when it comes to useless items and things like that. So I've put in over the last couple of days probably more time into Arc Raiders than I'd like to admit. I'm having a ton of fun with it. That's combined with the fact that Outer Worlds 2 came out last week. I'm playing a ton of that, and Battlefield 6, and now their RedSec mode, which I'll talk about in a little bit, their own BR. It's a busy time for me. I'm feasting right now. I'll talk about that and at the end of the show. But Arc Raiders is what I expected it to be. And this final version of it is cool because you finally see everything there. You see everything laid out, and that this is what this game is going to be. The game it actually kind of reminds me of is Helldivers 2 in a way. In that it's a third person game. The way they're handling their kind of battle pass stuff is very similar. Even the way that co-op works and stuff like that. One thing it really has going for it is kind of like Apex Legends, that has, like, I think the best pinging system in the industry. Helldivers 2 is up there too, where you can use pings and controller prompts instead of using voice chat. I would say voice chat is probably better for a game like Arc Raiders, but you can convey a lot just using the systems, the pinging system and emotes and the shouts and all that stuff. So that's really, really good. The game runs amazingly. It's an Unreal Engine 5 game, so the fact that it runs well is crazy, because especially on console, I'm playing Series X. That's like blowing people's mind, and it is surprising because the consoles don't handle that engine well. Probably goes to show you what, I don't know, maybe a little optimization and taking your time does, maybe some good development, but that's a whole different conversation. But it feels good to play. They've gotten a really good balance with the way it feels to control your character, gunplay, things like that. From a competitive standpoint, you've got people kind of complaining that it's I guess a competitive shooter game, but it's third person. So people are using, you know, corner peeks and stuff like that, using the third person camera. But there's also the whole idea of that everyone has that camera, like everyone's in the same boat. I've also noticed that it seems, whether it's on purpose or not, they've made some effort to try to make the camera not be able to be abused as much as you think, especially in interiors. Obviously you can still do it, I'm sure, but it's, so far it hasn't been that bad. I haven't had a lot of issues with the way things work out. I'm leveled, I don't know, like 3 or 4 at this point. I've played a decent amount. I'm also splitting my time between a few games. It's really exciting. Now, right now, I want to say that it has like 250,000 players. It'll peak this weekend. I'm sure people will get on, see all the hype, all that, and it's going to drop. I wouldn't be surprised. I suspect their goal or their hope is to settle in around, like, 30 to 50,000 players at any given time, especially at peak times, maybe more. And to just find a community that, this game isn't going to be a game. It's not going to sell 20 million copies. And I doubt that was their goal. I doubt that's the idea. This game, it's too hard for that. If you want me to be totally honest, it's there's going to be a lot of people who are going to play this and they're not going to understand it, or it's just not going to click with them or whatever. And either they'll get their money back or they just won't play or whatever, right? But I think it is going to find an audience though, of people who really get into it and make it like their whole life. The way they're handling like long-term play, like a game like Tarkov has wipes. So every time during the beta phase of the game, which has been like 7 years, that they have a big update, anytime they have a big update, they would wipe everyone's account. You start over from scratch. And that was fun a few times. I found it to become extremely tedious, as you just ended up playing the same quests again, the same missions over and over again. And you were playing against people who knew every single square inch of every single map, and knew how to like target at the beginning of wipes, and people, they would know where people would be going. I just didn't find it to be very fun. Arc Raiders is doing a system where if you want to wipe and experience some of the new things and acquire new gear and things like that, you'll be able to, but you don't have to. You can just stay. So you don't have to wipe. You can just keep playing your character, keep working on what you're working on. You'll be fine. I think that's a really good solution. I think it's really smart. And I just think what they've done with this game, the way it's been marketed, I mean, I haven't even talked about everything. Like I said, the visuals are amazing. It's a moody, whether it's the aesthetic of the game, having this kind of like 80s, 90s kind of aesthetic to it. The world is like very beautiful, but it's like very decrepit. The enemies, the PvE enemies, the robots, are like the hardest NPCs I've ever fought against. Whether they're smart or not, I don't really know, but they've designed their AI really well to make you feel like you're fighting this like oppressive force, like that it knows what you're gonna do. It's going to come at you hard, and you can take on like 1 or 2 robot enemies at a time, but if you get more than that, or you get one of the real big ones that are like really hard to fight, it becomes, you go from being like, oh, I can take out this one drone by myself pretty easy, to, oh my god, I'm terrified, running for your life, hoping that you can get away and that you don't have this run end up in failure, right? It's just, the sound design is insane. All the sound cues, both from like a gameplay point of view, where you can learn a lot about what's going on around you from the sound, and just the music in it is really, really cool. It's a really cool game. I'm gonna throw it out that it's not a game that's gonna be for everyone. I already said that. There's gonna be a lot of people who are not gonna get into this, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be for everyone, right? But I do believe this is gonna find a medium-sized, very dedicated fan base, and they already have a lot of updates and new content lined up for November, December. The last thing I guess I'll mention is that they have that content coming because the game's been in development for like 5 years, and they aren't having to spend a bunch of time fixing the game. There's going to be balancing things that they'll have to fix and work on. There's going to be things like that for sure, and there's bugs I'm sure that they're going to find and adjustments they have to make there. But this game came out in good shape, therefore they can just work on the game, like they can just work on content. And that's just really exciting. It's really cool that that I feel like there was a few years there where every game that came out was a hot mess when it came out, and then they would fix it up, and then it would be better a year or two from now. Cyberpunk 2077 being a big one like that, as well as others. So if Arc Raiders is your vibe, I think it's $40. It's not even a full price game, quote unquote. If it seems like you're into it, maybe watch some streams, see if it looks like something you'd be into. I highly recommend it. I haven't played it enough to score it on like a 0 out of 0 to 10 scale. And when I rate games like that, give it like a number, it's more about like recommendation and not like a rating of its quality. I think rating quality of a game is so subjective. But basically on like a scale of 1 to 10, how much would I recommend someone play a game? I mean, Arc Raiders, it's hard for me to give anything less than an 8. It's hard for me to give me more too, because like an 8 for me is a game that like, if you're interested in this, you'll probably love it. But like a 9 or a 10 is like, you have to play this no matter what. And I do think there's going to be people who are going to play this and be like, I'm not into this. Especially if you played like the open betas or any of the tests and it didn't jive with you. That is the game. Like the game that they put out in testing, it has a lot more features and it's more finished and all that. But if you didn't like the core gameplay of the test, you're not going to like this one. So I give it my recommendation. I would do a little homework before you buy. Next, we have Halo is coming to PlayStation. This has been rumored for a long time. During the Halo, I assume it was their esports event. I have to be totally honest. I will respectfully say I have just never given a crap about esports. I understand those people are better at a thing than I am, and that thing earns a lot of money. So those people win money doing it. Cool for them. That's super sweet. I don't know if you could pay me to watch other people play video games in that way. I watch some streams and stuff like that, but it's more like the interactive side of that with chat or the individual themselves getting me to try to watch games like a football game or something in the same way. Not happening. But the Halo event did come with the announcement of Halo. What was it called again? I have to look at Campaign Evolved. If you remember, the original Halo was called Combat Evolved. I think this name is pretty dumb. I get what they're playing on. I understand it. It's becoming harder and harder to fight the allegations that Microsoft / Xbox is terrible at naming things, whether it's their consoles or like in this case, like Campaign Evolved. I guess it's better than it just being like Combat Evolved Remake or whatever. Like it's more creative than that. But man, regardless, it's a Unreal Engine 5 remake of the original Halo game. It also includes a handful of new missions that will be like a prologue to the game, which I think is super cool, especially because this game is going to be targeted to all platforms, and that includes PlayStation. So I believe that there's some idea of like introducing the Halo universe to people who have just never had a PlayStation or an Xbox or PC and have never played Halo. That is at least part of the audience they're targeting here. Now, for me, I haven't played the original Halo probably since one of the first times I played it, like way back in the day. That would have been college for me. And I'm really interested in this. It's really pretty. There's been a little controversy about some things they changed and adding like sprint and stuff like that. I think it's pretty weak. Most of the criticisms I've seen, it's people just, riding the Xbox bad grift and the fact that like, it's hard to argue at this point that like most online gamers on social media, YouTube, Twitch, all that, it just seems like the majority of those gamers don't like games. I at this point have a hard time believing that most of the people, especially people who are just always so negative and pessimistic and snarky about everything, like I don't believe they play games. I don't think they like games. I think they either make a bunch of money from the way that they interact with the gaming community, or they're like sad and they just, that's how they work on it, or it gets worse. I don't know. Despite the criticisms, I think Campaign Evolved looks really, really cool. It going to PlayStation, well, it's weird. I'll give it that. I'm one who's been pretty vocally okay with Xbox's kind of multi-platform strategy, bringing games to other platforms when those games are no longer benefiting their own hardware and their own ecosystem. The way like Starfield still isn't on PlayStation, for one reason or the other, who knows why, exactly. Hellblade 2 didn't come to PlayStation for a while. They've done this where they've done these like timed exclusives that eventually come to PlayStation, but like Hellblade 2 isn't selling Xboxes anymore. We'll talk about it in a bit. I don't think anything's selling Xboxes right now, but that's a story that we'll get to after this one. But like Gears of War, I think is going to be day one. I'm pretty sure. Like the next Gears of War will be day one on PlayStation more than likely. The Doom game was day one on PlayStation. Gears, I could be wrong about that. I know that like remaster of the first one was. I don't know if they've said anything about the E-Day. it seems like they're doing kind of a mix, and it kind of sounds like they're letting the studios decide, how this works. And as much as I'm all about the multi-platform strategy, I think it makes sense. It sounds like it's pretty successful for them. I do wish there was even just like, I'm mixed on it. The only arguments I can make for having timed exclusivity on these like big titles like Halo, and keeping it from PlayStation, I can't even really defend it, right? Especially with the knowledge that it seems pretty obvious that Xbox at this point is happy if you want to buy their hardware, but is totally cool with you not doing it, that they are not making that a priority anymore. So knowing that, I can't really put together any arguments truly for doing timed exclusivity. If anything, it's probably worse for the games. And what we've seen with like a lot of the PlayStation PC ports, they hold these PC ports off for 2-3 years sometimes, and then it releases on PC. They don't sell very well, and then you can tell that it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy for PlayStation, where they're like, "Oh, our games don't sell well on PC. I guess we're not going to put them there." Where if they put them there day one, or 3 or 6 months later, they would sell really well, because the marketing cycle for the game would still be around. Like The Last of Us 2, if that game would have been PC day one, it probably would have sold a ton on PC. But instead it came out like 2-3 years later, I think, and it didn't sell that well. Same with the God of War games and things like that. I know a few of their games have sold okay on PC, but for the most part, I think it's been pretty underwhelming. So you have that argument with these Xbox games of like, sure, just to please the fanboys, we'll keep Halo off of PlayStation for 6 months. And then it comes out on PlayStation and sells like 1 million copies, right? But if they would have released it day one, amongst the hype cycle, amongst all the conversation, maybe it would have sold 2-3 million copies instead. And that matters. Like, that's a lot of money. That's a big difference. And so I've gotten to this weird point, and I think this Halo Campaign Evolved announcement was kind of the turning moment for me of like, I'm cool with the multi-platform strategy. I do wish they do timed exclusives. I can't actually make an argument for the timed exclusives. It's just a nostalgia thing, or a fanboy thing, or whatever. So that's kind of where I sit with it. I think this is cool. I don't really think it's that big of a deal. I think whatever the next Halo will be is the bigger announcement. There was conversation during this announcement, I think, from the community, the community person for Halo. They were literally wearing a PlayStation shirt. That's one of those ones where I'm like, ugh, let's dial it back a little. Like, that is weird, but whatever. It's kind of back to my whole thing of like, it's probably just nostalgia. If the next, like, if Halo 7 or 6 or whatever they're going to call it comes out and it's day one PlayStation, like, that will be, maybe by then I won't care. Maybe by then it won't be that big of a deal. Maybe by then, we really have gone all the way in on like, hey, buy an Xbox if you want. If not, play their stuff on all this other stuff. Maybe we'll be there by then. It's probably 2-3 years away. But man, right now, it's hard to think about that. But times are changing. A big thing I made before we move on here, I made a post about how I think one of the biggest issues right now with game coverage in the news industry, gaming outlets and influencers and all that, is that a lot of them are like my age or older, in their mid late 30s, their 30s, their 40s. And many of us are just stuck in that like 2000s era of like, Xbox has this exclusive and PlayStation has this one and Nintendo has this one. And you would never fathom, Helldivers 2 coming to Xbox back then. If you told someone that back then, that a first party PlayStation IP would get released on Xbox, they wouldn't have believed you. No one would have. That Halo would be coming to PlayStation. And while I am trying to be more open-minded and let my opinions on this evolve and to see the bigger picture, you can tell there's a lot of people, some prominent people, some very people deeply involved in the industry who are just never going to let it go. Like, it seems like there's a large number of people with a lot of influence who truly seem to be stuck on the idea of, if they aren't operating the way they were during the 2000s, they're failing. And with Xbox especially, it just seems like, there's this just refusal to accept that there's any chance that their strategy is working. even though they could reverse it at any time, right? Like at any time, Xbox could just make an announcement and people would flip out and they'd be mad. And they could say at any time, Game Pass isn't working. We're going to reduce the way it works or whatever. This multi-platform, it's not working. We're going to stop doing it. But that's probably not true. It probably is working. And I think more than anything, it's so strange to me, especially these old heads who seem so determined to be like, all of these new strategies are going to fail. This isn't going to work. Xbox should stick with their old strategy, which is wild, because I guarantee if you look back at some of these same influencers and journalists and stuff that 5-10 years ago, they were probably dogging Xbox for doing the things that they were doing the way they were, trying to make exclusivity work, trying to play PlayStation's game and failing at it like they have forever. I know people will be like, oh, the 360 was actually pretty successful. By the end of that gen, PlayStation 3 had caught back up. And then the Xbox One generation obviously went the way it did. And the Series generation is going the way it's going. So they're going to do something different. They don't want to keep failing. They don't want to keep being third place. So they're just playing the new game, right? And I would argue that all three of the platforms kind of are, that Nintendo's been doing their own thing for a long time. You almost can't compare them to Xbox and PlayStation at this point. But regardless, Halo is coming to PlayStation. Weird. Speaking of Microsoft, they put out their quarterly financial report, and a bunch of it obviously has to do with Xbox. The conversation around this was strange because in a media environment that is truly trying to be informative and fair and objective, this report would have been looked at as like not amazing, but not bad news either for Xbox specifically. But man, that is not what happened. That is, if you pay attention to this stuff, you will have seen dozens of outlets report Xbox hardware sales drop 30%, and then whatever over dramatic sensationalized rest of that headline that exists. Xbox fails once again, blah, blah, blah. Where if you actually look at what is in the report or read actual analysis of the report, at least, I wouldn't say it's like great news for Xbox, but it wasn't bad news. So the more, in my opinion, important details here is that the total revenue for Xbox went up 1%, which when I was reading about this, this quarter and these percentages, this is compared to the same quarter last year, I believe. So it was up 1%, even though it was expected to be down. I believe the specific language was mid single digits. So around 5%, let's say. So it was expected to go down a fair amount. I believe the quarter it's compared to was extremely good for Xbox. They made a ton of money that quarter. And the fact that it went up instead of down, like that's a big deal. Like if a big giant corporation like Microsoft or Microsoft with Xbox as its subsidiary makes a prediction that they're going to make less money than the previous year, like that's a big deal. That matters a lot. And for them to beat that expectation matters. Like that's important for them. They were so profitable, it sounds like, that, of course, the CEO, Satya Nadella, who we'll talk about more in a little bit, got a pay raise or a bonus or something because they did so well. Now, that's a whole different conversation, as things happen over the next year or two with layoffs and all that. And then that, the silly story from last week about the 30% margin that they're expecting, even though not even Nintendo does that. We'll get to that, I assume, another day. But they made over $5.5 billion in the last quarter. Like, I'm sure their costs are high. We know their costs are high. Their costs are probably like $4.5 billion or $5 billion, but they still made a ton of money. And that's even with this knowledge that hardware did drop 30%. But the whole thing is, when people see that the hardware, they sold 30% less last quarter than the one that they are comparing it to, that's, where are they selling consoles? It sounds like, and from what I'm surmising from all the news, is that there aren't really many consoles being imported at this point. And it's not because people don't want to buy them. They don't want to buy as many of them as PlayStations, but people want Xboxes, at least in some capacity, but they have to import them. I'm not under the impression that Xbox, before the tariffs that hit this year, had millions of Xboxes sitting around warehouses in the United States that they can just sell with no tariff on it. seems like for a few years now, they've probably been importing what they sell, and not having big, amounts of storage, because that costs millions and millions and millions of dollars to store hardware. When you're selling twice as many, like PlayStation does, you move through that inventory faster. The costs aren't as bad. You can justify having more here, right? That's not Xbox's situation. And now it's been exacerbated by these tariffs and the likelihood that they probably won't be making Series X's and Series S's for much longer. We have all these indications that 2027, maybe even as early as 26, there may be new consoles coming out. They very likely won't keep making them that whole time, especially if they have to pay tariffs on them to get them in here. And especially if they're selling for $650, even though they were $500 5 years ago when they released. Like, I think that there's this automatic assumption, whether it's by fanboys or console warriors or whatever, that them selling less consoles is just less people wanting their consoles. And that may be a slight factor, sure, but it doesn't seem like that's the main factor. I just, this report, I think you can run an honest headline on this report to be like, Xbox surprisingly has surprising sales, but hardware is still down 30%. Like, but that's not what we got. And that's frustrating for me. What's a little less frustrating, or at least a little more interesting to talk about, is Satya Nadella. I'm probably saying it wrong. I'm sorry. He's the CEO of Microsoft, and was recently interviewed and talked about the next Xbox hardware. Let's be very clear. It seems pretty well known out there, and it doesn't seem disputed by basically anyone, that Nadella knew nothing about video games coming in to Microsoft as a CEO. It's pretty well documented at this point that there was even the possibility, or his prerogative was just get rid of the brand, that he didn't understand why Microsoft was making video games or consoles. From all reports that I've read, he had no desire to be involved in the industry. And it sounds like, whether you like Phil Spencer or not, that Phil Spencer basically sold him on giving it a go still. And considering the moves they've made since then, for better or worse, he seems to have turned the corner. That said, even in this interview, when you pick up some of the things he says in this interview, it still seems like he has no idea how the industry works, or has no personal interest in it, but that for whatever reason, whether it's Phil or other forces, he's like bought into at least letting it exist. That said, talking about this, he talked about the next console and really pushed this idea of, at least the way I interpreted it, is that the next console will be a console. You'll start it up like a console. You'll use it like a console. There's all these rumors of it being like a hybrid PC console thing. I don't expect the next console, the next Xbox, for the average person to plug in a mouse and keyboard and use it like a desktop computer. It sounds like there may very well be ways to officially or unofficially do that, because it's going to incorporate kind of if you look at the way that this Asus ROG Ally X, the Xbox handheld that they did with Asus, where it boots into an Xbox system, but you can go over to Windows if you want. I don't even expect it to be like that. But what I do expect, and what he even alludes to in this interview, is that you'll be able to use it just like an Xbox, like you always have, but it's gonna be really, really powerful. It's gonna be this premium experience. But it will be able to do things as has been previewed by the handhelds. And that suggests that other storefronts could be possible to be able to access and things like that. Now, what I've seen people speculating is that, like, you're just going to open up an executable of Steam and have your Steam library there, and you'll just be able to download and play it. I suspect it's not going to be like that. I highly suspect that Steam will have an app for Xbox, and you can do that. You can log in and you can play your games that way. I don't know if there's going to be, there has to be money that exchanges hands here somewhere, whether it's between Microsoft and Steam or whatever. I have no idea. But I suspect it's going to be more of, you're going to have Xbox, you're going to have their store, you have everything there, all your old games, all that stuff. And then you're also going to have access to Steam, to maybe, GOG and some of these other ones. And through some kind of licensing or deals or whatever, you're going to be able to download those games onto your new Xbox from other storefronts, and play them. Right now, it's going to be limited by the hardware that's in there. That it sounds like, and especially if it's going to be like $1,000 console, like we're seeing rumored, it's going to be pretty beefy. I think the Series X is actually a pretty beefy piece of hardware, especially when it came out. It was pretty impressive in my opinion. And so they're talking about that, and they're talking about how it will run natively, not through emulators, old Xbox games. So that assumes it's still going to have its Xbox architecture and all that. That's why I'm not really sold completely on the idea that you're going to be able to like hit a button and like Windows 11 will pop up, right? Like I suspect it's going to be more locked down than that, but still have the capability to reach other storefronts. One of the big things that was, I don't think, lost on this conversation, but there was also a suggestion that multiplayer will not have any kind of paywall. So if you have a PC, you've never played to play multiplayer games unless that game specifically has a subscription. But on PlayStation and Xbox, you have to pay for one way or the other online access. So if you have a PlayStation or Xbox where you're not paying for anything, you're fairly limited on a decent number of things like multiplayer and certain games and things like that. So the whole idea, and this has been a long time coming for me, especially, it's been like, I get at this point, it feels like they're just keeping that online pay thing. Right now, the way you do it is by getting the cheapest tier of Game Pass, and that gets you online access. That just feels so cheap. Like at some point, let the people have Fortnite and just play it, with no multiplayer needed, just let them play it. You're going to get your cut of the microtransactions and stuff. Like surely that's worth enough, right? But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. So I still think this next Xbox is coming as soon as 2026, but I don't know anything, and it's all speculation. If it's 2027, and that's also when we're presuming that PlayStation 6 comes out, it's going to be really interesting if all of the combined rumors we have right now come true, where we're going to have this super high powered $1,000 console from Xbox that's going to be able to access other storefronts, and likely a like $500 less powerful PlayStation 6 that will be more powerful than the PS5 and the PS5 Pro, but may not be quite as powerful as the next Xbox, but it might be half the price, or maybe it won't be $500, maybe it'll be 6 or 7, but it will still be multiple hundreds of dollars cheaper than the Xbox. It'll be weird. It'll be a weird situation. And at this point, I still think it's going to be the PlayStation will sell 2-3 times more units. The Xbox will have its niche, especially as they push into letting people play wherever they want. And it will probably work for both of them. But who knows? I definitely don't. I've been continuing my Outer Worlds 2 playthrough. I did kind of my quick review of it last week and talked about the scores and stuff. I am just so impressed by this game. It's not the Cyberpunk 2077 or anything of that level. Like I'm not gonna pretend like it is when it comes to lip sync and the graphics and all this stuff. But what it is, and I mean this, I think Outer Worlds 2, at least what I've played so far, I think I'm like 20-25 hours in, is one of the best sequels I've ever played. Ever, like of any game, of any series. And it's because both story wise, but also gameplay wise, it really took Outer Worlds 1, which I loved, I thought was a great game, but it was definitely very bare bones. It had that Fallout kind of DNA, but was a newer game, obviously. But it's like gunplay wasn't very good, and it was pretty short. It wasn't a very long game. Outer Worlds 2, in my opinion, does all the things that Outer Worlds 1 did well, and then does them all better, and does a bunch of other stuff way better. The gunplay in Outer Worlds 2, I think, feels really great. Kind of how like Fallout 4 was a big step up for Fallout. I think Outer Worlds 2 is a big step up for Outer Worlds. I don't think it's Call of Duty, like actual first person shooter levels of satisfaction gunplay, but I think it's nice. I think it feels good. At least I've been enjoying it quite a bit. I've enjoyed the combat in general in the game. The graphics, it's got a style. If you played Avowed earlier this year, it's got that, realistic aesthetic. That's the general vibe, but it's not like a photorealistic game. And whether it's the art style or just a limited amount of work they were able to do on it, I still think it works. They definitely have a style about the armor and the buildings and the architecture and just the kind of general aesthetic of the whole game. It definitely has like kind of almost like a steampunky kind of vibe and things like that, but not all in on it, because I actually don't like steampunk that much. But it has like kind of like, you have guns and lasers and spaceships and all this, but like some of the architecture and stuff almost looks kind of like medieval or something, but not quite, like more like revolution. I don't know, it's hard to explain. But it's cool. I think it looks really, really good, and there's especially some areas that look like amazing. I think the thing I love the most about it is the story is like good. I don't think it's like the most compelling thing on earth. It's not blowing my mind necessarily, but what is blowing my mind is the way you interact with it and the way you interact with other characters. What I will say is that I think, and I haven't finished the game yet, and I maybe need to sit on it a bit more, this is probably the most reactive game I have ever played in my entire life. And by reactive, I mean based on choices you've made and your character and your actions, it seems like everything you do or say impacts something. So starting off the game, you pick your traits, you pick your background, you do the RPG thing, right? Like literally in the opening scene, the opening mission of the game, the opening, the beginning of the game, it immediately takes impact. The choices you made, the points that you've invested in certain skills or whatever immediately matter. Things that you say to people immediately matter and are remembered and impact the game. I just had, I believe something I did at the very beginning of the game impacted something that happened. I presume I'm in the middle of the game or maybe past the middle. When just in actual conversations, there's these times where like you'll respond to someone and it'll say this will be remembered. So what in just in the middle of these conversations, something you say off the hand could matter later in that same conversation or later in the game or to another character, right? When you're looking at computers and hacking and going around and reading books and stuff, things that you find in the environment can impact a conversation you have a few minutes later or way later in the game. And you can use that information that your character has to use a different response. The background you have can do that. The skills and the number of points you've invested in things can do it. And it's significant. Here's the thing. I presume halfway or maybe 2/3 through the game, I've faced off against, I believe, 2 or 3 people that you would consider a boss in the game. That there could have been this big, I was in like an arena. It was obviously supposed to be like a boss fight. And I haven't fought a single one of them. I've talked my way out of every single boss fight by either talking the person down or like bringing them to my side without spoilers, right? Like that is cool because I know I can do another playthrough. This playthrough I'm doing, I have a lot of like negotiation skills or whatever. So I can like sweet talk people basically, right? Where I know I can do another playthrough of this game where I'm just a brutal, just meathead, and I can just explode my way through the game. And I know all of these interactions I've done could go completely differently. And that's really cool. I love that. I think that's so exciting. And one thing it does have that Avowed didn't is that like Avowed, if I remember correctly, you couldn't hurt random people in cities and stuff. This you definitely can. Like you can definitely piss off the populace, and it does have the systems of like the different factions. You can improve your status with them or make it worse, and so on and so forth. So Outer Worlds 2 is just so excellent. Avowed was a lot of fun, and I loved Avowed. It's one of my favorite games this year. I'm not into the high fantasy kind of type of games as much, especially first person. So even though it wasn't my type of game, I still loved it. Outer Worlds 2 is definitely in that same vein of like they're doing all these things so well, but it is my type of game. It is kind of a more sci-fi type of game, more of an action RPG, right? And it's just, I love it. I love it so much. Can it compete with Expedition 33 for my game of the year? That's going to be hard. Even though Expedition 33 isn't really my type of game either, it impacted me in a special way. I legit might start that game up and play through it a little bit again to try to remind myself of like, oh yeah, this game was great. But I think Outer Worlds 2, we'll see how it ends. We'll see how the rest of my first playthrough go. It could be up there. But so could Arc Raiders, so could Battlefield 6, so could Assassin's Creed Shadows, so could Avowed. Like, oh man, it's been such a good year. I'm so excited. Heck, maybe Black Ops 7 blows my mind or something. I doubt it, but we'll see. It's been a lot of fun this year. Speaking of Battlefield 6, we have their season 1 has released this week, released on Tuesday, as well, or was it Monday? I can't remember. I think it was Tuesday, as well as their Battle Royale. That was like the worst kept secret on Earth, but it came out. It's called RedSec. It's like redacted something. It's probably not a great name for a mode if you can't easily remember what it stands for. Regardless of the not the best name on Earth, it's a lot of fun. If you ever played Blackout, which was Call of Duty's first Battle Royale mode before Warzone, which I preferred, I want to say it was Black Ops 4, maybe, that introduced it, Black Ops 3, maybe, that came with Blackout. Blackout was so fun. I thought it was just more simplistic. If you play Warzone nowadays, it's like Fortnite, man. Like, at least to my brain, when I've tried to jump into it, there's just too much stuff going on. It's just way too chaotic. Where Blackout was a much more simplified battle royale experience. It was just Call of Duty battle royale with some vehicles and some stuff like that. But it was really great. At least I thought it was. Battlefield 6's battle royale, this RedSec mode, is Blackout, but 4 or 5 years newer. I think it's a ton of fun. It's really good. I think a lot of the Battlefield kind of mechanics and things like that play into a battle royale really well. I will say that, like, I'm not gonna pretend like this is the only thing I'm ever gonna play again. After playing a few rounds of it, I was like, yeah, this is pretty cool, but I really like Conquest. I really like the regular multiplayer. But I'll tell you what, in the last 3-4 days, I think I've dabbled in Conquest and the regular multiplayer a bit. I think I've done like 20 or 30, if not more, RedSec rounds. So even though in my brain I'm like, well, I don't love it, I'd rather play this other thing, I keep booting up Battlefield 6. And when I'm like going through the different things to play, I keep doing RedSec mode. So take that for what it is. I like it. If you like battle royales, it's as serviceable as any other one is. They do, as part of the new season, though, there's new maps for the multiplayer. The map that's out, I like it, and the internet seems to hate it, but I think it's cool. It's a flatter map. The points are fairly close together. What's funny to me is that a lot of the complaints about Battlefield 6's maps are that, like, they aren't big enough or that the points are too close together. And all I can think about is like other Battlefields, especially 2042, where every map was so big that you would have to run for like 5 minutes to get from one point to another if you didn't have a vehicle. And that isn't fun, at least not to me. So I'm like kind of quietly loving the maps in Battlefield 6 because I feel like they're just better designed to actually play. But if you look on the internet, that is not the impression you'll get, at least from the vocal minority there. New weapons, I haven't really messed with them yet. There's like a new sniper rifle and stuff. There's new vehicles, and one of them is like an armored APC, like a big truck that has a mounted machine gun on top that's remotely controlled, and the other passengers can shoot in pretty small areas to the sides of the vehicle. It's awesome. It's so good. The regular like buggy that came with the game that was there when it first came out, it's fine. It's fast and it drives pretty fun, but it takes like 1 or 2 RPG shots and you're dead. So, and like one mine will blow you up and kill everyone in the car. So this new vehicle, while it's obviously slower, it's basically like a wheeled tank, and I've been having a lot of fun with it. I hope they add it to other maps. And then the battle pass got introduced as well. I think it's fair. I like battle passes. They are a dopamine hit for me. I don't hate them the way that seems like some people do. So that kind of is what it is. But yeah, Battlefield 6 so far, the season 1, it's what I expected. I've seen some people mad about some of the stuff. Like, it's a live service game. Even now, the Battlefield client on my Xbox is just called Battlefield. It's not even called Battlefield 6 now. They changed that. And that change kind of went under the radar a bit, I noticed, because it's a platform. It's a platform for multiplayer, for single player, and for the RedSec mode, and presumably in the future for future games, I imagine. So I'm having a ton of fun with it. Battlefield 6 has been everything I wanted it to be, and they're improving it. They're doing bug fixing, they're improving mechanics, they're making balancing adjustments. I'm really happy with it so far. I hope they keep pumping out content for it. And finally, we have some weird Mass Effect stuff. I have to talk about it. We're a week out when I'm recording this from 2025's N7 Day. Um, they have had like two kind of strange collaborations pop up this week. The first one was with Madrinas. If you watch a lot of streams or a lot of gaming YouTubers and stuff like that, you've probably heard of this company. I might not be saying it right, but that's how I read it. I think they started off as like a powdered coffee, like a coffee mix company where they collaborate with influencers and stuff like that. This Mass Effect crossover that they're doing is just this like fruit punch energy powder that you can get. Now, I definitely got it because I'm the worst. It's just a strange collaboration. I made a video about this that has like 2,000 views, which is a lot for me if you look at the rest of my channel. So it's hitting with people, whether for better or worse. I personally wish it would have been like coffee or something, or I wish they would have done a blue and a red drink and done like a Paragon and Renegade mix. But something tells me the investment that they were willing to make maybe wasn't that lucrative. But we had that. And then here, just in the last day or so, this U2's company, which I've never heard of, but they have like multiple million followers on social media and stuff. They make the little, almost like the Funko Pop kind of figurines, but not. They're a little different, I guess. I can't tell the difference, but that's because I'm like closer to a boomer than I'm not. But it appears to be Legion and a Krogan. I think it's Rex because there's like red lighting on it, but it could be Grunt, I guess. I have no idea. But yeah, so two more figures. This in itself isn't like big news for Mass Effect. I don't think this should be like a big crazy deal. But it is interesting that, these are the kind of announcements I would have expected on N7 Day. To be very clear, BioWare and EA have not made any official announcement of N7 Day even happening. We just kind of assume it's going to. I believe most of the voice cast has their Streamily streams already scheduled. So I don't think they did that last year, if I remember correctly. So it seems like I'm sure they're in the know in some capacity. And like I made a video. It was the video that has like 2,000 views about how this is a really important N7 Day for BioWare, more than likely, as either they try to prove their worth to the company who owns them, and or maybe they're kind of trying to shop themselves out a little bit and be like, hey, look at this community for this game that we're working on. If they aren't going to keep us, maybe someone should pick us up. But that's just speculation from me. I do plan on streaming that day on N7 Day, so check me out over on Twitch if you want to pay attention with that. We'll be hanging out until they post whatever they post. I think normally post around 12 o'clock Eastern time. So I'll probably start streaming around 10 or 11. We'll just hang out. I'll chat with whoever comes around, and then we'll dissect whatever comes out. And over the next month or two, you should see a bunch of videos and podcasts and stuff as I talk about it all. So I have high hopes because I choose to be optimistic. And I'm hoping that this is a big, fun, exciting Mass Effect N7 Day we can spend the next year, looking at stuff and making theories and all that. So come join me if you want. As for content updates and such, I just want to talk about how much fun I'm having with gaming right now, with videos and making the podcast. And, I put my kid to bed, my wife and I hang out for a little bit, and then she passes out, and then I come and play games. That's kind of my like nightly routine. And it's been this last couple of weeks. This has been a fun year in general, but especially the last couple of weeks, and especially right now, like I have to be like, oh, do I want to like keep going on Outer Worlds 2 on that story? But that can wait because Arc Raiders just came out, and like I want to level up and stay with the vibe and like stay with that whole that hype and all that. But then Battlefield 6, like, man, that multiplayer is really, really fun, and I'm liking the red sec mode more than I expected to. And then we still have Battlefield coming out, or Call of Duty coming out here in a month or so, and I like their single player, even if I don't care for the multiplayer at this point. I really don't care about Warzone. I think the new Warzone is called Blackout 2, which is kind of interesting. It's just, it's so easy if you listen to these podcasts, if you are on social media, if you look on YouTube and all this stuff, it's so easy to get caught up in all the negativity and the bickering and the console wars and fanboys, yelling at each other, and journalists clickbait and everything, and influencers doing the same thing. And it's so easy to forget that honestly gaming would probably be better for the average person who's involved in all this if we just stepped away. Like, I know there's gamers. I have, family and friends who play games, but they don't have a Twitter. They don't watch anything on YouTube. They just they get to play like once or twice a month. And they fire up a game and they play for a couple hours, and that's probably the purest gaming experience you can have right now. I'm not going to say I don't enjoy what I'm doing, making this podcast, making videos, being involved in all the discussion, right? But I will say that I think it would be good for everyone to just take a step back here and there and just enjoy what we've got going on. There's a lot of bad too, and it's good to pay attention to that. But I wish we would pay just a little more attention to the good. But that's my little spiel at the end of this podcast. The last thing is Scrubs. If you're a TV, this is a TV thing, not really games. If you liked Scrubs, I'm 37, so obviously Scrubs was in my like formative years. It's probably my favorite show ever. They did 8 seasons, and then the forbidden 9th season that no one talks about. The 8th season ended. It's one of the best endings, I think, to a long-time series ever. And now it's, so many years later, and they're bringing back pretty much the entire original cast, which the 9th season didn't have, and they're rebooting it, or they're continuing it, I guess. And I'm excited for it because it's not like they're going to try to pick this up from the end of season 9. They're going to be picking it up like, hey, 15 years later, and here's where all these people are at. And I'm really excited for that. So if you're a fellow Scrubs fan, maybe this will mean something to you. If not, sorry, but I felt like I had to talk about it. And that is where we will wrap this one up. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and thank you to everyone who supports as YouTube members and Twitch subscribers. If you're interested in supporting this podcast and all of my other content, please check out the links in the show description. If you have questions or feedback, hit me up on social media at Baundiesler at the Baunfire. Join my Discord via the Linktree link down in the description, or comment on Spotify or YouTube. Yes, you can comment on Spotify and I will see them and I'll reply. So be sure to do it. Be the second person who's ever done that. I'll be very proud of you. That is all I have for this episode of the Baunfire Gaming Podcast. So until next time.